What a treat. What an honor. Flattered to have him with us. Todd Sitrin, SVP and General Manager for EA's competitive gaming division. Works on a lot of awesome stuff. I'm Bryan Fenley. I am a national anchor for Fox Sports Radio. Really fascinated in having Todd on because of how much the world is gravitating towards esports. Certainly in the last 6 months, EA has grown exponentially, and look forward to asking Todd about all of this. But Todd, before we get into that, when your career first intersected with EA, how big of a sports fan were you?
A huge sports fan. So I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there, as many people know, college football is almost a religion. I grew up in a family of sports fanatics, and so I've been a huge sports fan. It really doesn't matter what the sport is; I will watch it. Yeah, I have teams in almost every sport that I follow. So huge fan. So, when I first came to work at EA, the role was to work in EA Sports. And, it couldn't have been, I had really two great passions in my life. And one was sports and the other one was video games.
Wow.
And so to be able to bring those together, I mean, it was like a dream come true to come to EA in that capacity.
When did the moment strike for you that you knew that you wanted to be a part of video games and sports? How young were you when this sort of was festering in your mind?
Oh God. I mean, I started playing video games very, very early. And one of my, early memories of playing video games was playing Madden NFL football.
Which version?
Oh, probably on Sega Genesis, probably time frame. So that's in the 90s, early 90s. I think that's when that was. And I remember obviously NHL '94, which is the classic, hockey version of that game. I worked at a company called 3DO in the late '90s, and FIFA was a game that was on that platform. And I remember, I actually, what part of my job was to work with the development studio at EA up in Vancouver to make that. And so I used to get early builds of the game on that platform, the 3DO platform. And me and other people at work, we would just play that game endlessly. And it was the first time, I believe, that a game had been made in a 3D environment.
Oh, wow.
On that platform. And so not exactly sure what year that was, but probably, sometime in the 95, 96 time frame.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, these are, early on, I've had a, passion for video games. As I said, I grew up in an environment of sports. And so, to have those come together, I've been at EA now for 19 years. And most of it has been spent, working in EA Sports. I have done other things within EA. And then 5 years ago, I got the opportunity to go even further, which was to do, competitive gaming, which is even more aligned with, the sort of sports ecosystem that's been created in traditional sports. So it's, I've been very fortunate to be able to take, my passions and make a career out of it.
I want to go that direction as far as the competitive gaming realm. But first of all, to tip anybody off to how much Todd loves sports, his Twitter handle is hattrick15. So the man loves sports. And I don't know if that's a reference to hockey or to soccer, but either way, you have your bases covered.
Yeah, it was originally, I started as a hockey, but it could be applied to football, as we say, in Europe. Or soccer here in the United States. So yeah, I'm like I said, I live and breathe sports. I met my wife, and our first thing to do together was to go to sporting events. Sure. I always joke, that she was the one when we started dating that had the subscription to Sports Illustrated was in her name. So, you know, it was a match made in heaven, and obviously we're still together, and we just, it's what gets us excited.
Well, you and EA has been a match made in heaven as well. Todd Sitrin is with us, SVP and General Manager for EA Competitive Gaming Division. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. The last 6 months, the last year, you look back at what this company has been able to do, and it's sort of like you've had to work a large audible. You had all these plans, and then life happened. The coronavirus happened, and you were able to find ways around it and to be successful. What was it like when TV executives came to you and said, look, we're trying to fill all of this live programming where we don't have sports at the time. What can you do to help us?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that we already had a strategy that we were executing on, and what ended up happening with the pandemic is it just accelerated going down that, executing that strategy even faster. So the way I'd sum up our strategy is that we've always believed that EA can take esports, competitive gaming, and bring it to a mainstream audience. And what I mean by the term mainstream is I don't mean that, my mom is going to, start watching, people play video games. I'm not talking about that mainstream. What I'm talking about is the term mainstream for me means that when you watch something, you don't actually have to have been a participant in order to find interesting in watching. Mm-hmm. So, if you think about the NFL, or you think about something as mass entertainment as the Super Bowl, what percentage of people that have ever, that watch the Super Bowl have ever actually put on pads and played tackle football? Not very many. But if you look at where esports has been, esports has been around globally for about 20 years. In the United States, it's a much shorter window, probably more like, it's been around, but it's really had some visibility, kind of more like in the 6 or 7 year time period. And if you look at who has primarily been viewing, it's been people who play the actual games, the video games of the esport that they're viewing. And so that's kind of the definition of a niche core audience. Now, that audience can be big, but it's not as big as creating entertainment that appeals to people even if they don't have that player experience. And when you think about, EA's games that we've decided to build esports around, these are really highly accessible games that everybody knows, especially on our sports side, Madden and FIFA.
Sure.
People know the teams, they know the players, they know the logos, they know the rules of the game. And so automatically it becomes more accessible. And so even for multiple years, we were one of the few publishers in, the esports industry that actually did do distribution on television. So we had these relationships, with ESPN here, or with Fox Sports, or with Turner. And so when the phone calls came in, it wasn't like we hadn't ever talked to those people. In fact, we actually had already had stuff there. But the nature was more of, okay, well, we used to take an hour. Now we'd like to take 5 hours. We used to talk to you about maybe doing something once, every 3 months. Now, what do you think about, once every couple weeks? Yeah. It was that sort of dialogue. And, that's what I mean is about accelerating towards this idea of bringing esports to a more mainstream audience. But that was only one of the big changes, Bryan, that occurred as a result of the pandemic.
Let's go to those other changes, because I'm certain you had a plan, a schedule for how this year was supposed to go. And then it's like, what are we going to do now? How do we improvise? How do we build a platform where we're going to have to do broadcasts remotely? So what does that look like, and how you were able to pull this off? This is a humongous milestone.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. It's a lot of really talented people on the CGE team, the competitive gaming entertainment team that I get the fortune of leading. So some incredible work. I mean, our planning cycle, we're on a fiscal year that starts on April 1 and goes to the following March 31st. And literally on March 13th, we took the plan for the year that we're currently in that started literally 2 weeks later on April 1st, and we ripped it up. And the reason we did is that all of those plans were based on certain assumptions of things that we could do. And we made a decision at EA and within the competitive gaming entertainment team that we were going to prioritize above all else the health of our employees and the health of our partners and the health of our community and our competitors. And what that meant for us was that we were not going to do anything that brought together people into any location. And that includes broadcast staff. So as you know, in broadcast production, throughout the summer, in the spring, and just in general, people have control rooms where they are having a lot of people that are producing shows. Even during the pandemic, they were doing that. We said we're not going to do that. So at the time that we made that decision, which was basically March 13th, I had absolutely no idea whether we would be doing anything. Because if we couldn't solve the technical problem of how do we live up to that goal, it would mean that we were just going to be shut down until, I don't know, a year, 2 years. I don't even know, how long it was going to be. The great thing is that we have a really lot of talented technology people and broadcast people. And, the industry, and I'm talking about the broadcast industry had never developed the ability to run production with 100% of everyone being remote, meaning 100% being in their home. And we set that as the goal. And what we found is that there was no system out there that could do that. And so what we ended up doing is creating a fully cloud-based broadcast platform by cobbling together literally a bunch of different technologies that were never designed for how we were using them. And actually by the end of March, so about 3 weeks later, we actually did a broadcast of an Apex Legends competition. If you go back and look at that stream, you'll see it wasn't quite so good, but we got on air. And from that, we've just been continuing to improve. And so now when you look at our broadcast, it's still today. There is not one person that is working in any place other than their home. 100% of people are separated. And I can tell you that I think it looks as good as our broadcast, when we used to be in a broadcast studio and do the full sort of execution that we used to do. And it really comes down to some really incredible broadcast talent that we have. And we built some stuff that nobody else had ever done. Since then, I think other people have now also tried to and have replicated some of that. But really for that month of April, maybe even into early May, I think we were the only people in the industry being able to do that. And that was a huge shot of confidence for our organization because, like I said, if the broadcast team at EA had not been able to do that, then we would be doing nothing.
How do you stomach that? The fact that what you guys pulled off, do you ever just take a moment and say, wow, did we really make this happen?
I think the team that is at EA and working on competitive gaming is really, really talented. And so I don't get surprised because maybe at this point I kind of expect, we have a really big focus on innovation. We're not content with just the way things have happened in the past. And so we're constantly trying to push ourselves, to innovate. And, innovation, as means that, a long time ago, people, told me that if you don't feel nervous before something, then you're obviously not innovating. And so I always tell our teams, your goal is to try to make me feel nervous. Because that means at least we're pushing the envelope.
Sure.
So, with the culture that I think is built around that, it is truly heroic what people did because, they were all doing it from their homes. They're all dealing with the same thing that all of us around the world are, which is we're dealing with our families. This is my home office, obviously not my real office. And, we're just trying to do the very best we can. But I think we were motivated by the fact that, video games in general, esports in specific, really is playing a really important role, I think, around, socially connecting people around the world in a time where they need social connection,
Yes, for sure.
providing a form of escapism in a time where we really needed escapism, and building and creating that community of fans that traditional sports do. But as we know, traditional sports haven't been able to bring and fill stadiums.
Yeah.
But, our esports industry has always been built around bringing people together in a digital way. So that was the normal way of bringing people together. And I feel really proud that, we have been able to get back to doing some of the things that we were doing before, and innovating in other areas, so that we could feel, kind of this gap that I think a lot of people have had. So I think that was a real big motivator for everybody. And, I heard from a lot of people within other parts of EA that just said what our team did was just really inspirational to them. It got them to say, okay, let's go figure out how to do some of the things that are really challenging us, because, other people are getting there, so we need to get there too.
So now you have this momentum, and thinking of innovation and what it looks like for EA moving forward, especially as the sports start filtering in. You've been able to capitalize on some new consumers, new viewers. There's this perked up interest. How do you keep those folks and do so with that added innovation that helped bring them in during the sports stoppage in the first place?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to our thinking around innovation, and it goes back to that original strategy about how do we bring things, this industry, to a mainstream audience.
Sure.
And I talked about it, in that March, April, May time period. I describe that time period as kind of a tectonic shift in the esports landscape. And many things changed, and we leapt into that and tried to lead on those change. I think other companies in the esports space, sort of hunkered down and said, we're just not going to do anything. Other people sort of said, we're just going to continue doing what we're doing. I think what we've tried to focus on is to really redefine what esports is about. So, you mentioned one of them, which is around, distribution. And, things previously had been very much 100% digital. I think we've seen that things can go broader than that. And we've obviously already talked about that. Another thing that was true of the esports industry is that it's been dominated by a couple genres, basically first-person shooters, and strategy games. And so traditional sports games like FIFA and Madden, that's new. That's new to the industry. So that we were trying to break the mold there. Then you look at things like the way it was presented. Everything, has been presented in esports historically in a very traditional sports broadcast model.
Yes.
We're going to have a play-by-play person. We're going to have a color analyst. We're going to have a sideline reporter. And that's how we're going to present it. And we said, well, why? Why does that have to be the only way in which competition is presented? Because in broadcast, there are a lot of competitions that are presented different than that, right? Think about the Great British Bake Off, or go think about Survivor or Wipeout or WWE. I mean, all of these things approach competition in a different way. So, as you may be aware, and in late July and early August, we created The Sims Sparked, which was to take a genre life simulation that no one would have ever thought could be around competition, and we based it on a reality competition model. Wow. So that we had people, it was more like Project Runway, but instead of them making dresses or making outfits, they were actually making houses and families and storylines inside of our game, The Sims. So that move to a different type of presentation is a huge part. And then another thing that we obviously believe that we can change is just the demographic of who's watching. So it's
Sure.
been such a male dominated, industry.
Sure.
So heavily male. The Sims Sparked was basically 80% viewers were female. It was one of the top rated shows for E-League, which is TBS's reoccurring show around esports. It was one of their top, so it shows you that there is an audience, that's actually quite large, but the industry was not paying attention to that. And even when you look at the competitors on the show, they were mostly female as well. So just trying to open up a different type of audience. And then I think the last thing is the length of these broadcasts. So again, esports has traditionally been 3 days of 8-hour broadcasts. I mean, it had more in common with the cricket type of
Sure,
timing, but that's not what Gen Z and millennials want. They want shorter time frames. So we're starting to now go, we're still going to do the traditional because there's an audience for the traditional.
Yeah.
But there's also unserved audiences that want something else. And so that something else is more entertainment focused, not traditional sort of sports presentation, probably shorter in length. We're now doing things that are 40 minutes long instead of 4 hours long type of stuff. And I think we're going to see that even, collapse even more. And then lastly, I think has just been the availability of celebrity.
Yeah.
As you know, because you work in an industry with a lot of famous sports athletes.
Sure.
If we wanted to include them previously in competitions we were doing, we'd have to fly them to a location, have them, that's a day, spend another day inside the studio, fly back out. A lot of people just would not make the time. But now, because we invented that fully cloud-based, broadcast platform, we can now go to somebody like Derwin James, who's safety for LA Chargers.
Sure.
And we say to Derwin, hey, we'd like to build an entertainment shorter time period type of show. And all you have to do is do it from your home on your own couch. And that makes it immediately more available because we've lowered the barrier to have people come in. So when you think about like, where does it go from here? Well, I don't know if we would have gotten to that entertainment celebrity angle had it not been for the pandemic.
Wow.
I don't know if we would have gotten maybe as fast to these shorter time frames. I don't know if we would have gotten to new formats, to play. We're doing a thing for Madden called King of the Hill, where basically we have 2 NFL players that play each other, and the winner moves on, and then they have to try to see if they can keep on maintaining it all the way to the top. And then we do another parallel one where it's an esports pro, and we're doing it. Here's one thing we are taking a page out of the traditional sports playbook, which is consistency. So every Tuesday night is a block of Madden competitive gaming programming. We're just finished week 2, and that's going to continue through the whole season. So it is really radically shifted the type of content, how we're delivering it, and also even the audiences that we're delivering it to.
What are these football players, these celebrities that play saying about their Madden rankings? You know how sometimes they're like, well, wait a minute. Do they ever have some fun with you with like, well, I should be higher than this. What are you guys doing?
Absolutely. In fact, I've been at EA for 19 years. My first job was to be director of marketing for the Madden NFL franchise. And so starting in 2001, I started, once a year, getting the opportunity to sit down with John Madden, the coach, and the game is named after. And we would talk about, and I wasn't the only one, there was a development group, and that was the primary reason for the meeting, which was to talk about like what's important in football. Mm-hmm. But I heard John tell this story almost every year. He'd say, I would go into locker rooms, and the only thing that the NFL players wanted to talk to John Madden about what, and this is when he was a broadcaster,
Yeah.
on air all the time, probably the most famous name in football. And all they would want to talk about is, John, the ratings in your game. And it's always down to one rating. I'm not fast enough. The rating does not have me at I'm faster than what your rating is. So it is a look, everybody wants to, be fast apparently. That's what I learned from that.
It's great publicity though for you, because even a Charger like Keenan Allen, I remember him when he went public, like a lot of these guys were saying, well, I deserve to be higher. That just gives more attention to you. And the fact that you've got these football guys playing that celebrity status, enhancing your product. You also have celebrities that are strictly players of the video game that are that good. How do you market them and make them present an entertainment to them, like their personality and their marketability that can be looked upon by fans and they can gravitate towards them as well?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Early on, somebody said to me that what sports is about is storytelling.
Yes.
And if you think about sports, I mean, there is a component of the physical nature of passing a ball, catching a ball, running. But I don't think that's really the reason why people watch sports. The reason they watch sports is because they have some sort of emotional connection to the team or the players, or there is some storyline that is motivating. And the way I know this is probably true is that I think to myself, like, when I get, up on a Sunday and maybe my team isn't playing, or maybe they already played, and I'm going through the various games that are being played, do I stop and watch the game that has two teams that I don't care about? They're at the bottom of the standings. There's no interesting people on the teams. Do I watch that game, or do I choose instead to watch the game where some of those things are in play? And the answer, I think, is for almost everybody is you don't watch those types of games. And so what that says to me is that, and this is a question that got asked a lot to me in the first few years of the competitive gaming team, is why would you ever want to watch somebody playing Madden or FIFA video game when they could watch the real sport? And what I say to them is because of this aspect of personal connection and storytelling. If you can make that connection, if the people are interesting, people will get sucked into that. And we know this to be true, because why would anybody watch Project Runway? Do people really care about making fashion? Do people really care about, baking? But these are huge, huge entertainment properties. And, what you have to do is to do what, frankly, in the world of sports is done every 4 years by the Olympics. I mean, it's amazing what the Olympics does, which is somehow get me to watch curling, rhythmic gymnastics, a bunch of stuff that I would never watch. But what's the story there? Well, primarily it's the story of tribal affiliation with the country. And you have to do that. But then there's also all those sub-stories of what's that person's background. So when we think about our broadcast and what we're doing, it's about exposing personalities. And that goes into the actual competitors, right? And they're learning, just like traditional athletes learned a while ago, which is not only are they a competitor, but they're also a brand. And they have to start treating themselves as a brand. How do they show up? How do they talk about their history? How do they present themselves? And, we're in the infancy. We're still in the infancy of our industry. The traditional sports industry has, many more decades there. But I think people in our esports industry are starting to figure out that it's kind of the same dynamic. And so they have to think about that.
The great Todd Sitrin is with us, SVP and General Manager for EA Competitive Gaming Division. I'm Bryan Fenley. Todd, my final question for you, the big projects looking ahead for your team, what are things that people can look forward to, and the big events that you and your team are getting ready to put out there?
Yeah. Well, the good news is that, we are right on the verge of launching a lot of our seasons for our games. We just started Madden NFL. We're about to launch into our season for FIFA. And so the FIFA Global Series will kick off here in October. And there's some exciting stuff that's going on there. And I think, again, we have what I would call traditional esports presented in a traditional sports presentation way for the audience that likes that. But this is a year also where we're going to expand upon that. And that means new formats like King of the Hill, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
There'll be some interesting stuff that you'll hear shortly around our other franchises.
Yeah.
It'll be shorter formats. And it will have those executions will have a focus that is even more so on the entertainment side to really draw in hopefully a broader audience. So we think of it as it's a large audience of fans out there, and we're going to try to deliver hopefully something that appeals to a much broader audience.
Let me leave you with this. I meant to mention this earlier. How good of a Madden player are you?
So growing up, I thought I was pretty good.
Okay.
Because I played it a lot. But what I've learned is that playing it a lot does not necessarily actually mean you're good.
Interesting.
When I worked in the EA Orlando Tiburon studio, which is down in Orlando, Florida, I ended up getting the reputation within the development organization as the person that should try out the things for the casual players.
Yeah.
Because despite what I thought about my own abilities, I was on the spectrum of players, definitely on the more casual side.
Oh.
So I was always sort of the litmus test for how is this something that's trying to appeal to a broader audience going to appeal. I am nowhere even close, obviously, to competitive into what we're seeing now. Yeah. And what we see now, I think it surprises even the people that develop the games.
Wow.
And I believe that the players that are playing professionally on our games, they're better than any of the developers at the actual game themselves. And in fact, we bring in throughout the year, we invite professional esports players of our games to come in and meet with the development studio so that we can think about what are the type of features and things that audience needs. Because what we're finding out is that designing a game for tens of millions of people that span all the way from me at the casual side to people that are really good, well, when you're dealing with the very best in the world, the best percent of a percent, of the audience, they even have different needs than everybody else. So it's been interesting partnership with our development studios over the last 5 years to get that organization to think about, okay, we got to make sure the game works not just for the person who picks it up for the first time, but also works for the person that is playing hours and hours every day and is literally making a financial living playing the video game.
The spectrum you have covered, the user input is definitely noticed, because every year the game is that much more refined, that much more fun. Todd, you're such a humongous part of all this. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. Hopefully our paths cross again soon. And thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.